Alright my friends, let me show you how this build is completely invincible to damage, no matter what your enemies throw at you. We are almost completely naked, with basically no items, just for fun, and let's just go ahead and enter turn-based mode. We're going to start by gaining damage resistance, which I'll do using Blade Ward, just an easy way to do that. There's lots of other ways to gain damage resistance. Previously, we've stacked our Arcane Ward and cast a level 3 Armor of Agathis, and now we're just going to have Karlach attack Gale here. Sure, reckless attack, so we don't get a critical hit. Notice that Gale has suffered 0 damage, and Karlach has taken 30 in return. And then we're going to go ahead and do that again. Well, we got a critical hit, and Gale took 0 damage, and Karlach has taken another pile of return damage. And then let's just go ahead and drink a speed potion. And give it one more shot. We've got Karlach down to 5 health after 3 attacks, and Gale has taken, yep, you guessed it, 0 damage, and let's do it again. Well, still no damage to Gale, and our enemy, in this case Karlach, is dead. Alright, let's get to the build. Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today, we're covering the very best tank build in Baldur's Gate 3, which is, of course, a wizard build, because what other class would it be? Barbarians who? This is one of the very strongest builds in the game. In my list of top builds for Honor Mode, I ranked this build at number 5, and it's one of the most powerful and most straightforward and easiest builds to play through Honor Mode with, because it is almost impossible to lose the game when you're playing this build, because it's so good at tanking that it effectively cannot die. You do all this while also being a fully functional wizard, with all of the might of the game's highest level spells at your disposal, and in addition to that high level spellcasting, you also do excellent, consistent damage turn after turn after turn, without having to take an action or even roll a die, so even the very unluckiest players in the world will be able to defeat their enemies using this build. This is, of course, an update build to one of my previous videos of the same name, because that was one of the very first build guides I posted to YouTube, and 9 months later, there's definitely some things that we've learned and some optimizations that we can make, and so, of course, I wanted to update this build so that it is ready for the Honor Mode era, so that you have this extremely powerful character at your disposal in its most powerful possible state. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Darth Revan for the $20 donation and reference to one of my favorite games, Adrianos for the 100 zlotys, Joe Rundle for the $20, J.R. Tomlin for the $10, and Zero Slash for the €6. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support, and it really does mean a lot. Alright, let's get to the build. We're using Gale as the example character here, because of course he is the wizard of the party, but also human actually makes a pretty excellent choice for the race that you pick when you're building this character. The reason for that is that there's a lot of shields in the game that we use very well with this character, so getting shield proficiency, which we won't pick up from levels, from our race pick, can improve the power level of the character dramatically. For that reason, human makes a pretty good pick, but the optimal pick is probably half Wood Elf, because increasing your movement speed while gaining shield proficiency is excellent. This character will want to be moving around the battlefield very frequently, because one of your main play patterns is moving to enemies and then away from them to deliberately provoke attacks of opportunity, so having additional movement speed helps with that. Half Wood Elf gives you the movement speed to do that much more reliably. Other options include Githyanki, because medium armor can do a good impression of shield proficiency, gives you a lot of the same abilities available, and of course Githyanki gives you additional skill access and bonus mobility with Misty Step, and Halfling to reroll ones can make the character even more consistent. Although this is a wizard build, we're actually going to be starting not as a wizard, but instead with a level of sorcerer. This build needs a specific sorcerer subclass in order to function. And when you're taking sorcerer levels in another caster, you usually want to take sorcerer as your first level. The reason is that sorcerer has con save proficiency, so it's good for maintaining concentration on your spells. Less important for this build since we aren't going to take damage, so we won't usually have to make concentration checks, but still very useful, especially in the early game. And second, because of how Baldur's Gate calculates save DCs for items, we want to take Wizard second in order to make sure that those use our intelligence. So we take Sorcerer as our first level, and the Sorcerer subclass that we're going to take is Draconic Bloodline. We're going to take the White Dragon Ancestry Sorcerer, because this gives us access to the spell Armor of Agathis. This character is going to be a tank, taking attacks from enemies and taking no damage. So the temporary hit points will help keep us alive. If we ever actually do take any damage, we'll have temporary hit points to block them. And the cold retaliation damage will be a great way to kill enemies, because they'll hit us and take a bunch of damage. Armor of Agathis, if you upcast it with higher level spell slots, can deal up to 30 retaliation damage of cold damage. And since it's cold damage, if you have a wet enemy, they take double damage from cold. So they'll take 60 damage every time they hit your character, plus any other additional retaliation we can add on to that. So even the very toughest enemies will melt in only a few times attacking this character. And since we're not taking any damage in return, we're happy to let them just keep punching us until they fall over. For our cantrip selection here, because this is going to be a wizard build primarily, we don't want to take any offensive cantrips, because we don't want to cast them using our charisma. So we're going to use our sorcerer level to pick up only utility cantrips. The most important of these is Blade Ward, which can have incoming damage, combined with our very high damage block. This is going to make us almost invincible to damage, because it's going to have the damage and then block a bunch of damage. Then we're going to take Mage Hand. Mage Hand is super useful to this build because we want enemies wet. Mage Hand itself can throw bottles of water at our enemies, doubling the damage from Armor of Agathis. We will also pick up Minor Illusion to lure enemies into groups and stuff, and make thieving more easily, and Light because that's useful to every party. For our spell selection, we're going to pick up Shield, great defensive option, especially useful in the early game before we have our other defenses online, and Magic Missile because it doesn't use your character's stats at all, it always hits, and so this is going to be a solid early game combat spell. We're always going to want these two spells so we can just grab them from our sorcerer levels. For our attribute selection, we're going to build a pretty odd selection for a sorcerer, because this is of course a wizard, so we're going to build 16 intelligence, 16 constitution, 14 dexterity, and 12 wisdom. This gives us the best attribute spread to keep our character alive, make sure we have high save DCs, and good initiative and armor class, in addition to a decent wisdom save. For our skill selection here, this character mostly won't be making skill checks, so you can pretty much pick whatever you want for flavor. You likely won't be using them as a party face or as a lockpicking character, so whatever skills you want them to have are totally fine. That's it for the decisions we have to make at level 1, so let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we're going to immediately leave Sorcerer and go into Wizard. And for our Wizard level, we're going to pick up our offensive cantrips, because we can now actually make attack rolls with our intelligence. We're going to grab Ray of Frost, Firebolt, and Bone Chill. All three of these are useful in different circumstances, so it's nice that this character gets their utility cantrips from Sorcerer and can take all three of these. You can use Firebolt mostly for setting fires, or if you just want a little bit more damage. Ray of Frost will typically be your best offensive spell, and can also be used to freeze puddles, causing enemies to fall over. And Bone Chill is good against undead who heal, or against enemies who heal, or against undead, which giving them disadvantage on their attack rolls can be very powerful. For our spell selection at this level, we are going to make sure that we pick up Longstrider and Enhanced Leap. These are ritual spells, so they don't cost us a spell slot to use and power up your character significantly. Grease is very good, and Chromatic Orb is another great combat spell. You can use this for the ice version, because this is kind of an ice build, in order to create a gigantic ice surface. When an enemy is on an ice surface and they fall over on their turn, they lose the rest of their turn. So you can basically stun whole groups of enemies with Grease or Chromatic Orb while still outputting decent damage. Fog Cloud can provide blinding with no saving throw, and then Disguise Self has a bunch of utility, so we're going to make sure we grab those. Of course, we're a wizard, so we can learn any spell, so you just want to make sure that you pick up the spells from scrolls that you haven't found. but this is a good default selection to get you started. For our prepared spells at this level, ignore the higher level ones. That's just because a bunch of characters have... that's just because this character has learned a few spells from scrolls in this save. You're definitely going to want Chromatic Orb and Grease as your 2 combat spells. Long Strider because buffing your party's movement speed is very good, and then probably Fog Cloud for some utility. At Wizard level 3, we get to start doing the thing. We are going to choose our Wizard subclass, or Character level 3, Wizard level 2. We get to choose our Wizard subclass, and of course we're going to pick the Abjuration Wizard. This is the core of this build, and what makes it so incredibly powerful. Abjuration Wizard gets Arcane Ward, which has a very useless tooltip, but how this works is that every time you cast an Abjuration spell, you gain stacks of Arcane Ward equal to the level of that spell. So if you cast a level 2 Abjuration spell, you gain 2 stacks. You can have a maximum number of stacks up to twice your Wizard level. So at this level, we can have up to 4 stacks. When an enemy hits you, you reduce incoming damage by that amount, and then lose 1 stack, no matter how much damage we're taking. So enemies who are attacking us are going to have their damage vastly reduced. As we continue to level up in Abjuration Wizard, the flat damage reduction is going to outpace the amount of damage that just about every enemy in the game is capable of dealing. And if we add in damage resistances and more damage reduction from other sources, enemies will have to deal literally thousands of damage in order to get through our defenses. And then we can reset those by casting more Abjuration spells. For our spell selection at this level, you are just going to pick up anything that you haven't learned from a scroll at this point. Some that can be useful or Find Familiar, Ice Knife, they may come in handy occasionally. But remember also that we're a 3rd level spellcaster, so we can now learn 2nd level spells from Wizard Scrolls. So you can go find any Wizard Scrolls with level 2 spells and start learning those, so you'll have access to 2nd level Wizard spells for great combat options starting at this level. At level 4, we get access to 2nd level Wizard spells that we can learn. Of course, we've been able to learn these from scrolls already, but some important ones to have available are Cloud of Daggers, and also for this character, you want to have Abjuration spells that you can cast while outside of combat, of various different levels to make sure that you can always refresh your Arcane Ward charges outside of combat. Arcane Lock will save you some clicks, because you can just spam click it over and over again to refresh your Arcane Ward. Since we're a level 3 wizard now, our Arcane Ward has 6 stacks available to it, which means that, let's say an enemy is attacking you for 10 incoming damage, which is just like a normal greatsword hit from an enemy, and you have Blade Ward cast on yourself. That 10 damage gets halved to 5, and then we reduce it by 6, so you take 0 damage. If they attack you again, their 10 damage gets halved to 5, and we reduce it by 5, so you take 0 damage. Only on the 3rd attack, when the enemy has dealt 30 damage, have we taken a single hit point of damage, and this is just going to keep getting more and more powerful as we continue to level up. For prepared spells at this level, you're going to want a couple higher... a couple more powerful high-level spells available. Keep Chromatic Orb, keep access to Chromatic Orb. Cloud of Daggers is great to concentrate on just for default combat damage. And Arcane Lock, you can swap in and out of having it prepared in order to gain Abjuration, Arcane Ward stacks, but this is just one that's useful to have for outside of combat. You've got great combat spells, and of course remember that you always have Armor of Agathis, which is what you're going to be spending a lot of your spell slots on. At Wizard level 4, we get our first feat, and of course our Arcane Ward stacks go up to 8 maximum. And for our feat here, we're just going to go ahead and take Alert. This character definitely wants to go first, and unlike a lot of other wizard builds, we don't actually need super high save DCs on our spells, since we are able to use our Armor of Agathis, so even if an enemy passes a saving throw against us, we still have tons of damage return that we can do to them, because we just have to walk next to enemies for them to die. Alert just means that we're always going to be able to position ourselves next to an enemy before they act, or use our powerful control spells, which of course we still get because we're a fully functional wizard, to lock down enemies. Because we're a 5th level caster now, with 4 levels of wizard, we can also learn up to 3rd level spells from scrolls, which is of course extremely powerful, and 3rd level spells are where a lot of characters get their power spike from. For our spell selection at this level, again, you're just going to fill in things that you haven't found from scrolls. Because you're a wizard, you're just going to kind of play Pokemon at this point. Flaming Sphere is very helpful to be able to concentrate on and distract enemies. If the incoming damage is too much for your Arcane Ward, this can absorb a few hits for you. Web can lock down some enemies. Those all have various options as well. For our cantrip selection here, you are kind of running thin on useful cantrips to pick up. You can take Shocking Grasp on this character. Because you're going to be in melee a lot of the time, you can use Shocking Grasp sometimes. Typically, it's not going to be a good use of your action to cast it over the other offensive cantrips, but just to have all of the options available, Shocking Grasp can be useful. Remember, the main thing that Shocking Grasp does is remove enemy reactions, which is very good, of course, but this character can do that, but just by walking away from the enemy. They'll attack you with an attack of opportunity, wasting their reaction. So you duplicate Shocking Grasp, but this can still be very useful for a little bit of extra damage if you happen to be in melee, which this character often will be. At Wizard level 5, our Arcane Ward stacks are now up to 10, which is the point where most enemies in the game simply cannot hurt you. It's a rare enemy who does more than 20 average damage with a single attack, and when you have damage resistances applied through Blade Ward or other means, an enemy who does 20 damage, that gets halved to 10 and then reduced to 0. So those enemies just simply cannot affect you. If an enemy hits you with a Fireball, Fireball does 28 average damage. If you have fire resistance and 10 Arcane Ward stacks, you take 4 damage from an enemy Fireball, and they've spent their entire high-level spell on this. So you can see that we are already resisting almost all of the damage output that most enemies are capable of doing, and that only costs us a single charge of Arcane Ward, which we can get back by casting Abjuration spells. So we're going to be able to just tank through just about anything that the game can throw at us. For our spell selection at this level, there's 2 that are pretty important to have. If you haven't found it from a scroll, you definitely need to learn Glyph of Warding, because Glyph of Warding is going to be our main combat spell. It's a level 3 Abjuration spell, so when we cast it, we get back 3 stacks of Arcane Ward, so this lets us just refresh our Arcane Ward stacks in combat. And it's an ice spell, so enemies who are already wet, which is something that we want to do, will take double damage from it if you use the ice mode. All of its modes are relevant. This looks like a landmine, but you can just cast it directly under an enemy. It goes off immediately, so it's just a powerful AoE combat spell as well. In addition to that, we're going to want Counterspell. Counterspell, of course, very important to every party to have access to. This, one of the few ways you can lose with this character is if an enemy hits you with a really powerful saving throw targeting spell, because you can't take damage, but you can get hit by like a mind control or a paralysis or something. Counterspell just protects you from that. Weirdly, Counterspell doesn't give you Arcane Ward stacks, even though it's an Abjuration spell. That is a bug, which is a little unfortunate for this character, but still too useful to pass up on. Also important to note, there are no scrolls of Counterspell in the game, so you do have to learn it from leveling up. At level 7, we continue to take wizard levels, going up to 12 maximum Arcane Ward stacks here, and we also get Projected Ward. So now, as a reaction, if an ally gets attacked, we can project our Arcane Ward to block that attack. So our allies now have as much protection once per turn as this character, which makes your whole party vastly more difficult to kill. For our spell selection at this level, again, you're just going to focus on any spells you haven't found from scrolls. This character can use Sleet Storm. You will make a lot of ice surfaces, but Sleet Storm is just a great way to provide a gigantic ice surface. Haste is very useful. Since you will never lose concentration on your spells, because you're never going to take actual damage, you can always haste an ally, especially if there's a fight where you don't want to spend too many spell slots. You can just haste an ally and have them go to town with physical weaponry while you tank all the enemy's attacks. So those are some good options if you haven't found them from scrolls yet. For prepared spell list at this level, we're going to pick up some of our 3rd level spells. Make sure that you have Glyph of Warding known. You definitely want Counterspell, or Glyph of Warding prepared. You definitely want Counterspell prepared, and you are likely to want Haste. You can also add in one of the good AoE control spells from this level, like Sleet Storm, Fear, or Hypnotic Pattern. My recommendation is that you swap out Grease for Sleet Storm or Hypnotic Pattern, because this can let you lock down an encounter. Again, you're never going to lose concentration on spells, so being able to just lock down the whole encounter is super powerful for this character. At level 7, we already have had access to 4th level spells for 1 level, but now we can learn them from level ups, any that we haven't found from scrolls. And of course, our Arcane Ward goes up to 14. Important spells to have from this level include Conjure Minor Elemental. This just makes your whole party much more powerful. And Fire Shield. Fire Shield gives you even more damage return, as well as the cold version of Fire Shield giving you resistance to fire, or the fire version gives you resistance to cold. So that is an easy way to gain those resistances when you are in a fight where an enemy is providing a lot of that damage. The damage tooltip for Fire Shield is a little bit misleading because it shows both the 2d8 fire and the 2d8 cold. It's either one of those, so it's not a massive bonus to your damage output, but if you use the cold damage version of it, that's 9 average damage on the 2d8. That gets doubled by enemies being wet, so that's going to be an additional 18 average damage added to the 60 damage return that you can do from Armor of Agathis. Or at this level, because we have 4th level spell slots, we're doing only 40 damage return. So this ups our retaliation damage from 40 to 58, which is enough to kill almost every enemy at this level in like 2 hits. So they hit you twice and they just die. At character level 9, we get our 8th level of Wizard, and of course we get access to 5th level spells that we can learn from scrolls, because we're still a 9th level caster, and we get another feat. For our feat, we're just going to take an ability improvement here and boost our intelligence up to 18. If we wanted to as well, you could start with 17 intelligence, use Ethel's Hair, and to go to 18, and then have this bring you to 20 and not sacrifice any intelligence. If you're not using that, and this character really doesn't need to do that, because you can use spell save DC items to boost your save DCs to where you want them regardless, and a lot of the time you won't be casting spells that have save DCs anyways, then 18 intelligence is totally fine, but of course 20 intelligence is also a great option. Make sure that you pick up whatever spells you haven't found scrolls for at this point. Some other important ones to have access to: Greater Invisibility, of course, if your party is using that. Ice Storm is just always good, because it creates a giant ice surface and does a bunch of damage, doesn't take your concentration, so you can concentrate on other stuff. Banishment is an Abjuration spell, so it will give you arcane ward stacks while also targeting enemies' charisma saving throws. Some enemies have very low charisma saves, so banishment can be very good against them, so I would pick those up. It's always useful as well to make sure that you have Abjuration spells of various different levels. While you can just upcast spells in other spell slots, Protection from Energy is very useful to have access to, because this character wants resistance to incoming damage, so you can have Protection from Energy up for fights where you're going to take that kind of damage. So this is another good one to keep an eye out for and pick it up if you haven't found it at this level, or even at earlier levels. At character level 10, we get our 9th level of Wizard, so 18 damage reduction from Arcane Ward. Important 5th level spells to keep an eye out for: of course, Conjure Elemental is the top tier 5th level spell for wizards, because the elementals are really good. The Myrmidons also can apply wet in a gigantic AoE, so when you have access to 6th level spell slots next level and you summon a Myrmidon, that can make everything wet which means that you no longer have to like throw bottles of water or have an ally cast create water. Conjure Elemental can just handle that for you, which is pretty nice as well. And it does a bunch of cold damage, which synergizes with the whole thing that you're doing. Just makes your whole party that much more powerful. Hold Monster is very useful for some encounters. To be honest, there's not a lot of 5th level spells that you really need to prioritize, so this is a good point to pick up any important utility spells from lower levels that you haven't managed to find scrolls for. At Wizard level 10, you get access to 6th level spell slots, which of course give you the most powerful spells in the game, and let you upcast Armor of Agathis using a 6th level spell, so it gives you 30 temporary hit points and 30 return damage. For our, we also get improved Abjuration, so now we can increase our Arcane Ward intensity. Basically, we get 10 free stacks of Arcane Ward every time we short rest, which increases the longevity of this character significantly. It's many fewer spell slots that you have to spend building back up Arcane Ward that you might happen to have lost. So this just gives you a lot of free value over the course of an adventuring day and lets you rest much less frequently. For our cantrip selection, of course, we're going to take True Strike to annoy people in the comments. And for our spell selection, we're going to go back and grab any utility spells, again, that we haven't found at earlier levels. Finally, at Wizard level 12, we already have had access to 6th level spell slots, but now we can pick up any that we don't have scrolls for. And we get 22 damage reduction from our Arcane Ward, which combined with damage resistance is enough to block damage from all but the very strongest single attacks in the game. Basically nothing does enough damage to break through all your damage resistance at this point, and this character becomes functionally invincible. For your level 6 spell selection, a couple to keep an eye out for and just make sure that your party has access to. You always want Globe of Invulnerability available if you are going into a fight where this character's damage reduction isn't enough, which is very rare, but potentially possible given some odd circumstances. Globe of Invulnerability will just let you completely avoid that, maintain your Arcane Ward stacks as well by not taking any damage and so on, and of course keep your vulnerable party members alive. Chain Lightning can just blow up a whole encounter, so very useful for AoE damage, and Wall of Ice creates a gigantic ice surface. Enemies will be wet already, so they'll already take tons of damage from the Wall of Ice. The trick here is you cast it, and then cancel it immediately to deal the 10d6 cold damage just twice over. Both instances of that get doubled, so you deal 40d6 cold damage, and just obliterate an entire encounter. Anything that's left standing is on an ice surface that just falls over. So Wall of Ice is excellent for this character as well. Just make sure that you have all of the 6th level spells, but Globe of Invulnerability is the most important. Alright, that's the build, but of course we can improve it even further with item selection, so let's talk about that. One of the really great things about this character is it requires no specific items to function. This character is entirely contained within its levels, so you don't need any specific itemization, and that leaves all of the items available for your other party members who might need them more. Of course, there are some items that we benefit from, but a great thing about this character is it's extremely flexible, so it can just slot right into any party, because it makes no demands on your party's item availability. There's basically two kinds of items that we want. We want spell save DC increases, so items that increase our spell save DC, like the Fistbreaker Helm, will be very helpful for landing our control spells, and any items that reduce incoming damage. Things like the Bone Spike Garb that give us 2 flat damage reduction, well that's basically 2 more Arcane Ward stacks, as well as a little bit of extra retaliation damage. So the Bone Spike Garb just makes us even more tanky, and is probably what you're going to want to end up wearing later on in the game. A couple specific notable items for this character include the Morning Frost. We're going to be doing a lot of cold damage, so the ability to just inflict vulnerable to cold on enemies passively without having to hit them with water does make this character play out quite a bit more smoothly. As well, you can use things like the Ring of Regeneration, so if an enemy does manage to break through and deal a little bit of damage to you, you heal it back up immediately. A cool combo is the Snowburst Ring. We're dealing tons of cold damage, so we're going to create a lot of ice surfaces. But because a lot of the cold damage we're dealing is in melee, we're going to need some way to not fall over on our own ice surfaces. But this can be used to knock enemies over by dealing cold damage, that an ice surface appears under them and then they fall prone, so you can get a lot of free crowd control out of this. Items that refresh our spell slots as well, like Markaheshkir with its Arcane Battery ability, is very useful because, or rather, this one makes the spell not cost a spell slot, but same thing. Anything that lets us cast free spells is very helpful because we want to cast a maximum level Armor of Agathys, but we also want to cast other 6th level spells, so the ability to refresh our spell slots is particularly helpful for this character. This guy also makes a great Markaheshkir user. Any character can use Markaheshkir. You can attune to cold to deal even more cold damage, or lightning and just blast enemies with chain lightning, just like most other Markaheshkir characters. But if you have another character who wants it more, you can use that as well. Carrying around Scrolls of Fire Shield can benefit you a ton with this character also, because then you don't have to spend spell slots casting Fire Shield, which is fine to do. Casting Fire Shield with your spell slots is also a fine use of a spell slot for this character, but not having to spend them is very helpful. This character also makes an excellent candidate for Warding Bond, and even if you don't have a character who can cast it, you can use the True Love's Caress and Embrace rings in order to have an ally cast Warding Bond on your character. This gives you resistance to all damage, and the way that the Warding Bond damage is calculated is the caster actually takes just whatever damage the character who gets hit lost from their actual hit points. Since this character is never going to lose hit points, the casting character is in no danger even when they cast Warding Bond on you, so you just get resistance to all damage for free if you cast Warding Bond on this character, without ever putting your other characters in danger. Other than that, just standard good caster items, increases to initiative, increases to save DC are all good, and anything that reduces incoming damage in any way, items that provide you save resistances are good. Also, items that allow you to cast Abjuration spells can help you stack Arcane Ward, so anything with a bound Abjuration spell in it can give you more Arcane Ward stacks. A couple quick notes on playing this character as well, and sort of general combat strategy. Firstly, and most importantly, don't forget that you're just a fully powered wizard. You're basically a wizard with no downsides. You have all of the powerful spellcasting of a normal wizard, but none of the associated vulnerability. So sometimes it's best just to play like a normal wizard would, but not get hit, because enemies either won't target you or can't hurt you, and you can just use your extremely powerful spells to win an encounter. Just because you have the trick of the retaliation damage doesn't mean you have to use it, it's just one tool in your arsenal. Secondly, enemies will often choose not to target this character, because the AI in Baldur's Gate often does a damage calculation, like an expected damage calculation, when it's deciding who to attack. You can mitigate this in a couple ways. One is by lowering this character's armor class, so you can deliberately tank your armor class to make yourself a more attractive target to enemies. Two is by increasing two is by forcing enemies to make attacks of opportunity against you. Just walk into range of them, and then they will attack. The third way, of course, is just by placing your other party members out of reach. If this character is the only thing the enemies can target, they will either go attack it or just skip their turn in confusion. Either way, you're very happy because the enemies have done nothing useful with their turn, so you just get to crush them. Basically, there's no downside to playing this character. Even if enemies don't target it, that's good, because then you just have an invincible wizard, which is a great thing for your party to have. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this look at the Invincible Tank Wizard, one of the very strongest builds in Baldur's Gate 3, and I hope it brings you many honor mode victories. If you have enjoyed the video, of course, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm. I know it's annoying to be constantly asked this, and believe me, it annoys me to have to ask it as well, but it really does help out with the algorithm, so I really do appreciate you taking the time to do so. And I do read every single comment that I get, even if I don't have time to reply to them all, so I really do appreciate seeing all of your thoughts. Also, of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 builds and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, my friends, and I will catch you next time.